On February 14, 1943, in the Solomon Islands, a Japanese naval aviator's hand trembled as he entered words into his flight log that would have warranted severe punishment had they been discovered by his superiors at Rabaul. He wrote that the new American fighter was not merely the inferior machine they had been told to expect, but something that defied their entire understanding of aerial combat. Through the smoke of battle over Guadalcanal, Japanese pilots had just engaged the F4U Corsair for the first time, marking a pivotal moment in history. In an event that American history would grimly dub the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 12 Corsairs from Squadron VMF-124 clashed with Imperial forces in a chaotic melee that resulted in the loss of 2 Corsairs and several other Allied aircraft. Although this engagement appeared to be a tactical stumble for the Allies, with significant losses on both sides, it actually signaled the debut of a machine that was destined to fundamentally dismantle the status quo of the Pacific Air War. With the arrival of the Corsair, the foundational beliefs of Japanese naval aviation, their absolute faith in technical supremacy, and the invulnerability of the Mitsubishi A6M Zero began to crumble under the weight of a new reality. Unbeknownst to the Japanese pilots, they were witnessing the prologue of a devastating transformation that would eventually reduce their elite aviators, the very men who had swept across the Pacific from Pearl Harbor to Singapore, to flying desperate, one-way suicide missions in hopelessly obsolete machines. The calculus of aerial warfare was being radically rewritten, shifting away from the samurai virtues of individual pilot skill and warrior spirit toward the cold, industrial metrics of horsepower, armor thickness, and overwhelming production figures. This shift would soon expose the fatal strategic miscalculation at the heart of Japan's war effort: the assumption that the Bushido code could somehow triumph over the arithmetic of modern industrial output. To fully grasp the psychological devastation the Corsair inflicted, you must first understand the atmosphere of supreme confidence that permeated the Imperial Japanese Navy in early 1943. For 2 years, the Zero had dominated the Pacific theater with such impunity that the kill ratios were intoxicating, often reaching 10-1 in Japan's favor, fostering a belief in their divine superiority. The statistics of that era were staggering. At Pearl Harbor, the loss of only 9 Zeros resulted in the destruction of 188 American aircraft, and over the Philippines, nearly 550 Allied planes were claimed against fewer than 40 Japanese losses. During the Indian Ocean raid, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida recorded kill ratios that suggested supernatural dominance, with 45 British aircraft shot down for the loss of just 4 Zeros. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, destined to become Japan's leading ace with 87 confirmed victories, wrote to his brother in February 1943, describing the Zero as a perfect weapon that harmonized with the pilot's spirit like a samurai sword. In contrast, he dismissed American aircraft as heavy, soulless flying trucks that could never match the Japanese unity of man and machine, a sentiment that was not merely propaganda, but a reflection of the Zero's genuine performance superiority in 1941 and 1942. With a range of 1,929 miles, the Zero could escort bombers over distances that American planners deemed impossible, and its turn radius of 612 feet at 200 miles per hour was nearly half that of the F-4F Wildcat. Lieutenant Kaname Harada, a Pearl Harbor veteran, recalled that they felt invincible, dancing in the air with thoroughbred machines that responded to thought alone, while the brave but technically outmatched American pilots lumbered around them in aircraft that handled like cattle. However, by late 1942, invisible cracks in this superiority were emerging, though the Japanese Naval Command stubbornly refused to acknowledge them. The Battle of Midway had extracted a devastating toll, costing not just 4 carriers, but 110 of Japan's most experienced aviators, men with thousands of flight hours and combat experience in China, whose skills were simply irreplaceable. Even more disturbing were the classified technical reports from the front, where Commander Minoru Genda, the tactical architect of Pearl Harbor, noted that American fighters were becoming increasingly difficult to shoot down. Pilots reported that the new F-6F Hellcat seemed to absorb tremendous punishment, often taking dozens of 7.7mm rounds without effect, while the Guadalcanal campaign demonstrated that the Japanese could no longer count on numerical parity. Where once Japanese pilots faced equal numbers, they now routinely encountered American formations of 20, 30, or even 50 aircraft, proving that the spiritual code of Bushido could not overcome the arithmetic of mass production. The first confirmed encounter between Zeros and the F4U Corsair on February 14, 1943, saw 12 Corsairs escorting Liberator bombers in an engagement that, while tactically inconclusive, introduced the fighter that would soon dominate the Pacific. The technical reality of the Corsair was a shock to Japanese analysts. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine generated 2,000 horsepower, more than double the output of the Zero's Nakajima Sakai engine. This raw power translated into a maximum speed of 417 miles per hour and a climb rate to 20,000 feet in just 7.5 minutes. Performance figures that rendered traditional Zero tactics completely obsolete. Perhaps most devastating was the Corsair's ability to maintain control in dives exceeding 450 miles per hour, whereas the Zero experienced control surface freezing above 350 miles per hour. This shifting balance of power was fully demonstrated during the engagement of April 7, 1943, during Operation Igo, signaling the end of the Zero's reign. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto initiated his final major offensive, known as Operation Igo, by dispatching a massive force of 224 aircraft, with 110 specifically targeting Allied positions. Over the skies of Guadalcanal, this armada clashed with 76 Allied defenders, including Corsairs from Marine squadrons, leading to a devastating outcome for the Imperial Navy. The engagement resulted in the loss of 39 Japanese aircraft compared to only 12 Allied fighters, signaling a grim turning point in the air war. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, who would later command the legendary VMF 214 Black Sheep Squadron and achieve 28 aerial victories, was a key participant in these early Corsair operations. In his autobiography, Baba Black Sheep, he described the evolving tactics, noting that while the Zero was a dream to fly at slow speeds, American pilots refused to play to that strength. Instead, they perfected the boom and zoom tactic, diving from high altitude to fire during a high-speed pass, then utilizing their excess energy to climb away before the Zeros could exploit their superior maneuverability. By May 1943, Japanese technical teams had thoroughly examined captured Allied aircraft and field reports, and their findings were nothing short of terrifying. The industrial capability inherent in the Corsair's construction was something Japan simply could not match. For instance, the 155 pounds of armor plating protecting the pilot and oil systems weighed more than the entire airframe of some Japanese training aircraft. The defensive engineering of the American fighter was equally overwhelming, featuring a bulletproof windscreen 38 millimeters thick that was capable of stopping 7.7mm machine gun rounds at point-blank range. Furthermore, the self-sealing fuel tanks, designed with layers of rubber that expanded to seal punctures, effectively prevented the catastrophic fires that claimed the lives of so many Zero pilots. However, the most lethal disparity lay in the armament, as the Corsair boasted 6 Browning M250 caliber machine guns, each delivering rounds with 8 times the kinetic energy of the Zero's lighter weaponry. Carrying a total of 2,350 rounds, the American fighter possessed enough ammunition for 30 seconds of continuous fire, which was triple the capacity of its Japanese counterpart. The destructive potential was absolute, with the ANM-2 armor-piercing incendiary rounds capable of penetrating 21 millimeters of armor at a distance of 500 yards. In stark contrast, the Zero's total armor protection was effectively non-existent, leaving it completely defenseless against such heavy fire. By June 1943, intelligence reports reaching Japanese naval headquarters painted a picture of American production scales that defied comprehension, with the United States destined to produce 12,571 Corsairs by the war's end. This massive output was divided among manufacturers, with Vought building 4,952 F4U variants, Goodyear producing 3,941 FG models, and Brewster contributing 735 F3A variants. While Japan would manufacture 10,449 Zeros throughout the entire conflict, split between Mitsubishi's 3,879 and Nakajima's 6,570 units, the raw numbers told only part of the story. The American industrial machine did not just produce volume, it integrated continuous evolution, whereas Japan struggled to innovate at the same pace. The American design rapidly advanced. The F4U-1A introduced a raised cockpit for superior visibility. The 1C model mounted 4 20mm cannons, and the 1D could carry 4,000 pounds of ordnance. By late 1944, the F4U-4 had arrived, boasting a 2,450 horsepower engine and a top speed of 446 miles per hour. Meanwhile, the A6M5, which became Japan's most produced Zero variant, offered only marginal performance gains over the original 1940 design. This technical stagnation, combined with the Corsair's superiority, exposed a fatal doctrinal flaw in Japanese naval aviation: the catastrophic inability to replace their experienced aviators. The pre-war Japanese training program was famously rigorous, enforcing a 95% washout rate to create pilots of exceptional skill. Yet this elitist system could only graduate about 100 pilots annually. In contrast, the United States Navy expanded its program with industrial efficiency, churning out 25,500 pilots every month by 1943. The disparity in training quality was just as stark, as American pilots logged 600 hours of flight training, including 200 hours in advanced fighters, before ever seeing combat. Conversely, Japanese replacement pilots in 1943 averaged a mere 100 to 150 hours of total flight time, and by 1945, some kamikaze pilots were sent into action with as little as 40 hours of experience. The mathematics of attrition became inexorable. Every veteran Zero pilot lost was replaced by a novice with 1/6 the training, while every downed Corsair pilot was succeeded by an aviator of equal or superior skill. With each engagement, the qualitative gap widened, ensuring that the Japanese air arm decayed while the American force grew stronger. Rabaul, once Japan's impregnable fortress in the South Pacific, transformed into the graveyard of its naval aviation between October 1943 and February 1944. Continuous battles with Corsair-equipped squadrons decimated the remaining cadre of elite Japanese pilots, creating a statistical record of systematic annihilation. On November 11, 1943, carrier air groups struck Rabaul's harbor and airfields, destroying 35 and damaging 40 of the 270 available Japanese aircraft. By December 17th, when a major Allied raid launched 31 Marine Corsairs alongside 22 Navy Hellcats and 23 Royal New Zealand Air Force P-40s, the Japanese opposition had crumbled to the point of irrelevance. By January 1944, the psychological tide had turned completely, with Japanese pilots refusing to engage Corsairs unless they held overwhelming numerical superiority. This was a humiliating reversal from 1941, when solitary Zeros would fearlessly attack entire enemy squadrons. Although the F4U Corsair did not participate in the Battle of the Philippine Sea on June 19, 1944, where carrier operations were dominated by F-6F Hellcats, the engagement highlighted the total shift in aerial supremacy. The results were catastrophic for the Imperial Navy, which lost 445 aircraft compared to just 30 American combat losses. The kill ratio had swung from 10-1 in Japan's favor at the war's start to nearly 15-1 in America's favor. While the few Corsairs present served only as distant land-based cover, the battle's outcome reflected the same insurmountable technological and training advantages that defined the Corsairs' dominance. Japanese naval aviation never recovered from this defeat, and by late 1944, surviving pilots faced a complete psychological collapse. Having entered the war as the vanguard of the world's premier naval aviation force, they now flew with the crushing knowledge that they were inferior in every measurable way, a reality somberly noted by Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace, in his memoir, Samurai. The Japanese military had completely lost its competitive edge, suffering insurmountable deficits in equipment, pilot quality, and numerical strength. The arrival of advanced American fighters effectively signed the death warrant for younger, inexperienced aviators who possessed neither the combat skills to fight nor the mechanical speed to escape. This grim reality was sealed in October 1944 with the introduction of the F4U Corsair, equipped with a 2,450 horsepower engine that could surge to 2,760 with water injection, and capable of reaching 446 miles per hour. This machine shattered any remaining illusions of parity. This new American variant proved capable of outperforming the Zero in every conceivable flight regime, forcing a psychological shift among Japanese pilots from elite dogfighters to sacrificial weapons. The transition to suicide tactics represented the ultimate admission of defeat, a brutal logic articulated by Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi during a staff meeting in October 1944. He argued that continuing with conventional attacks would result in the loss of 100% of their aircraft for negligible gains, whereas adopting special attack units would guarantee the same total loss of machines but offered the chance to inflict meaningful damage on the enemy. This theory materialized into devastating practice on October 25, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, when 50 Zero fighters managed to attack American escort carriers while carrying 250-kilogram bombs. For the Marine squadrons flying Corsairs, the mission profile shifted dramatically as they found themselves intercepting pilots intent on dying rather than fighting, a total inversion of traditional aerial warfare. Lieutenant Yukio Seki, who commanded that first official kamikaze mission, left a haunting written testament before his death, observing that Japan's future was bleak if it was forced to sacrifice its best pilots, and noting that he flew not for the emperor or the empire, but simply because he was ordered to do so. By 1945, captured documents and post-war analysis laid bare the immense technological chasm between the two adversaries. When comparing the 1945 F4U Corsair against the 1943 A6M Model 52, the American machine held a massive advantage in speed, reaching 446 miles per hour against the Zero's 351. The disparities continued in vertical performance, with the Corsair boasting a service ceiling of 41,500 feet compared to 36,250 for the Zero, and a climb rate of 3,870 feet per minute versus 2,625. In terms of raw power and durability, the Corsair's emergency output of 2,760 horsepower dwarfed the Zero's 1,130, a difference reflected in the American plane's significantly heavier frame of 9,205 pounds against the Japanese fighter's 4,136. Crucially, the Corsair delivered a crushing weight of fire of 6.7 pounds per second against a mere 2.3, while protecting its pilot with 155 pounds of armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Vital safety features the Zero completely lacked. Industrial statistics compiled after the war highlighted the sheer impossibility of Japan's strategic position, particularly when examining production figures from 1944. In that single year, the United States manufactured 100,752 aircraft, including 16,731 fighters, whereas Japan could only muster 28,180 total aircraft, with just 5,474 being fighters. The economic divide was even more stark, with the United States boasting a GDP of $1,499 billion in 1990 international dollars, roughly 8 times Japan's $189 billion. This overwhelming economic might allowed the U.S. to outproduce Japan in fighter aircraft by a ratio of more than 3-to-1, all while maintaining superior build quality in every single unit. While the raw casualty numbers are telling, Japan lost approximately 25,000 naval aviators compared to 8,950 for the United States in the Pacific. The statistics only hint at the full story. The true tragedy lies in the composition of those losses. By the middle of 1944, Japan had already sacrificed 90% of the elite pilots trained before the war, while the United States never lost more than 15% of its experienced cadre at any given time. By 1945, the Japanese training infrastructure had completely collapsed, leading to a catastrophic decline in pilot proficiency. New recruits received merely 30 to 100 hours of flight time before being thrust into combat, a fraction of the 600 hours given to their American counterparts, leaving many kamikaze pilots to embark on their final missions without ever having fired their weapons. The operational dominance of the Corsair forced a fundamental rewrite of Japanese tactical doctrine, with standing orders by 1944 strictly prohibiting engagement unless pilots held a 3-to-1 numerical superiority. Even under those favorable conditions, Japanese pilots were instructed to attempt a single pass and immediately disengage if they failed to score a hit. The survival rules distributed to these pilots in late 1944 tacitly admitted complete inferiority, warning them never to attempt to outclimb or dive away from a Corsair, and to avoid head-on attacks due to the enemy's superior armament. They were further cautioned never to fly straight and level for more than 20 seconds, and, if ambushed, to execute a split S maneuver and attempt to escape at minimum altitude, attacking only when holding the elements of overwhelming advantage and surprise. By early 1945, the situation had deteriorated from a crisis into a total collapse, with pilots forcing aircraft into the air that had not seen proper maintenance in months. These compromised machines burned low-grade 87-octane fuel instead of the required 91 or 100 octane needed for peak performance, and often flew with reduced ammunition loads to save weight. In stark contrast, American Corsair squadrons, finally cleared for fleet carrier operations after December 28, 1944, benefited from superior support in every operational aspect, including radar direction, rescue services, excellent maintenance, and regular rotation home. The statistical record of engagement between the two fighters paints a picture of absolute American dominance, with the Corsair achieving 2,140 aerial victories against only 189 losses, resulting in a kill ratio of 11.3 to 1. When narrowing the data specifically to engagements with the Zero, the numbers become even more lopsided, with 1,562 confirmed kills against only 124 Corsairs lost, a ratio of 12.6 to 1. Furthermore, survival rates for shot-down pilots diverged sharply. 64% of downed Americans survived, compared to a mere 8% of their Japanese adversaries. Ultimately, these machines were physical manifestations of opposing national philosophies. The Corsair embodied the American approach of solving problems through overwhelming material superiority, while the Zero represented the Japanese ethos of achieving maximum capability with minimum resources. When these contrasting ideologies clashed in the skies, material abundance proved to be the decisive factor, a reality acknowledged by Zero designer Jiro Horikoshi. He later reflected that while his design was an elegant solution to poverty created for a resource-poor nation, the American fighter was a powerful expression of unlimited resources, proving that in war, abundance inevitably triumphs. During the subsequent American occupation, Japanese military personnel were finally granted access to detailed U.S. production records, and the figures left them stunned. They discovered that the manufacturer Chance Vought alone had produced nearly as many Corsairs as Mitsubishi had manufactured Zeros throughout the entire conflict. The financial data reinforced this disparity, with a Corsair costing between $50,000 and $75,000, compared to approximately $25,000 for a Zero, reflecting not industrial waste, but a relentless commitment to quality that the Japanese economy could not match. The United States invested heavily in pilot safety, simply because its robust economy could support such an expense, and the resulting dominance of the Corsair imparted crucial lessons that would later define Japan's post-war evolution. It became painfully clear that technological superiority inevitably supersedes tradition, as even the most skilled aviators are rendered helpless when matched against vastly superior hardware. Furthermore, the conflict demonstrated that quantity possesses a quality all its own. The ability to mass-produce capable machines will always triumph over a limited output of perfection. A critical realization was that survivability is paramount. For pilots who perish cannot accumulate the combat experience necessary to turn the tide of battle. Victory is ultimately dictated by industrial capacity and the efficiency of a nation's factories, where the speed of ongoing innovation outweighs any initial tactical advantage. Maintaining a static superiority is a recipe for eventual obsolescence, a hard truth that became a cornerstone of Japan's future industrial strategy and fueled the economic miracle that eventually emerged from the ashes of defeat. The narrative of Japanese aviators engaging the F4U Corsair serves as a stark illustration of the collision between ancient tradition and ruthless modernity. While the Zero embodied the zenith of minimalist engineering, where every gram was shaved away to save weight, the Corsair stood as a testament to industrial abundance, prioritizing raw power, heavy armor, and overwhelming firepower without compromise. When these two opposing design philosophies clashed in the skies over the Pacific, the conclusion was mathematically inevitable, long before the first shot was fired. Neither the fierce dedication of the warrior spirit nor exceptional piloting skill could bridge the gap created by the harsh laws of physics, where the American fighter boasted twice the horsepower, 6 times the firepower, and heavy armor against a completely unprotected foe. Japanese squadrons who had entered the conflict convinced of their own technological and spiritual supremacy faced a devastating psychological reckoning as the Corsair dismantled their formations. They were forced to confront the reality that their tactics were outdated and their vaunted machinery was now hopelessly obsolete against an adversary with limitless manufacturing might. The arrival of this formidable machine did far more than simply destroy Zero fighters. It effectively dismantled an entire worldview, proving definitively that industrial output crushes the intangible warrior spirit. The conflict demonstrated that technological advancement defeats traditionalism, and that the preservation of a pilot's life is infinitely more valuable than the reduction of airframe weight. These agonizing lessons, absorbed at a terrible price across the Pacific theater, became the catalyst for transforming a militaristic empire into one of the modern world's most successful, peaceful democracies. Paradoxically, the bent-wing fighter known to its targets as Whistling Death became a catalyst for Japan's national rebirth, proving the absolute supremacy of industrial democracy over rigid, militaristic tradition. This realization helped guide the nation toward a new trajectory, evolving from a wartime adversary into one of America's strongest allies and economic partners. The aviators who survived these encounters carried forward a hard-won wisdom that defines the modern era. Whether in war or in peace, the ultimate victor is the nation with the most advanced technology and the most efficient production.